Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this year's Asia Leadership Forum. My name is Michel Hox, and I'm the director of the Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies. 女士们、先生们，下午好。欢迎您参加本年度的亚洲领袖论坛。我是圣母大学刘氏亚洲研究院院长，我叫贺迈晓。I'm not going to be here for a very long time, so I'm going to continue in English now. The Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies of the University of Notre Dame was established in order to promote the study of Asia and to enhance the visibility of Asia, all matters Asia, on our campus. I think we're doing pretty well. Thank you to all 327 of you who registered for today's event. In just a few seconds, I'm going to hand over to Father Jenkins, President of the University of Notre Dame, who's going to introduce our keynote speaker, former President Ma Ying-jeou of Taiwan. The President will give a keynote address with a slightly changed title compared to what is on your program. The title is Taiwan's New Role in Asia and the World. Immediately following the keynote address, President Ma will be on stage in conversation with Professor Shelley Rigger, who is the Brown Professor of Political Science and Assistant Dean for Education Policy at Davidson College, and also this country's most distinguished academic expert on Taiwanese politics. We are delighted to have her with us today. And following that discussion, my colleague Professor Michael Desch from the Department of Political Science will moderate a question and answer session as he did for the first Asia Leadership Forum last year as well. And we're very grateful that Professor Desch is with us here as well. For practical reasons, the question and answer session will consist of Professor Desch actually reading out the questions that you have submitted. And thank you for your understanding. We will finish at 5:45 exactly. And I will remind you at that time that you are pleased to remain seated until President Ma has left the room, and then you are free to go. But for now, please welcome Father Jenkins.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, honored guests, Notre Dame community, and friends. I just want to begin by saying how tremendously grateful I am, we all are at Notre Dame, to the Liu family, and to the Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies for making the visit of Ma Ying-jeou, former president of Taiwan, possible. To the members of the Liu family who are with us this afternoon, thank you. Thank you for supporting us so generously in the crucial work of supporting awareness, understanding, and knowledge of Asia throughout the Notre Dame community and far beyond. You have made and will make a tremendous impact on Notre Dame, and we hope through your generosity we will make an impact on the world. I also want to respectfully acknowledge Calvin Huo, the Director General of the Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office, who is also with us this afternoon. A very warm welcome to all. The Honorable Ma Ying-jeou was born in Hong Kong, and he graduated from the National Taiwan University, New York University, and Harvard Law School. In Taiwan, he served as Justice Minister and Senior Vice Chairman of the Mainland Affairs Council through the mid-1990s and as Mayor of Taipei from 1998 to 2006. Mr. Ma was elected the 12th President of Taiwan in 2008. His administration initiated widespread domestic reforms in education, energy, healthcare, welfare, taxation, and the environment. From the beginning of his tenure, his greatest commitment was his pledge to ease tensions with cross-strait relations. He is the first Taiwanese leader to meet with the leader of the mainland. During his 8 years in office, he secured 23 substantive agreements with his mainland counterparts, culminating in his historic and unprecedented 2015 meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Here's a story that exemplifies Mr. Ma's approach to his presidency and which connects him to the Liu family, who also hail from Taiwan. In 2014, when he was president of Taiwan, President Ma attended a memorial on Armed Forces Day at the National Revolutionary Martyrs Shrine to pay respects to soldiers who died fighting in Burma during World War II. It was the first time a Taiwanese president had paid homage to the tens of thousands who died along Allied forces in Burma. After the ceremony, Mr. Ma shook hands with some of the soldiers' descendants, including those of the heroic Major General Liu Bangwu, the late father of Robert Liu, in whose memory the Liu Institute was established. At Notre Dame, we are especially committed to leadership that is based on crossing boundaries, mutual understanding, and cooperation. That is why it is my very great honor, on behalf of the whole Notre Dame family, to welcome the Honorable Ma Ying-jeou to Notre Dame. Mr. Ma.
President Jenkins of Notre Dame University, Provost Burish, and Professor Hart, Chairman Liu of Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies, Director He, the Chicago office of TECRO, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. 大家午安. It is a great honor for me, as a former president of the Republic of China, Taiwan, to be here at the University of Notre Dame, an outstanding Catholic institution of higher education. This is my first time here, but my early life had a lot to do with the Catholic Church in Taiwan. My parents were from Hunan province in China and went to Taiwan in 1948. But my father went back to the Chinese mainland in 1949 to get my grandmother and two sisters out to Hong Kong before it was too late to flee the Civil War. My pregnant mother joined them in Hong Kong in 1950, and I was born there shortly thereafter. In 1951, my family moved to Taiwan. A friend of mine from Hong Kong told me that, in business terms, he said, you were made in Taiwan, delivered in Hong Kong, and re-exported to Taiwan. At the time, Taiwan was a small, war-born island that had just been returned to the Republic of China in 1945 after 50 years as a Japanese colony. My grandmother, a former Buddhist, and my four sisters and I were all baptized in the 1950s by Father Remy van Hyfte, a Belgian priest at Xi Yuanlu Catholic Church in Taipei City. In my childhood, my family and I received many goodies from the church, so we were very grateful to the Catholic Church and to Father Van Hyfte. 3 years ago, I had the rare opportunity to attend the inaugural ceremony of Pope Francis in the Vatican. The Republic of China has had diplomatic ties with the Holy See for 70 years, but up to then, no president from ROC has ever visited the Holy See. So I was thrilled to be the first one. Before I went, I asked around whether His Holiness spoke English, but no one knows, curiously. And my wife and I arrived at the Rome airport in March 2013. Even the protocol officer from the Vatican did not know whether His Holiness spoke English. So after the inaugural ceremony, all the head of state from more than 30 countries line up to congratulate the new Pope in person. I asked a Vatican staff worker nearby, and again, no answer. So when my turn came, I had to use 40 seconds words of Spanish that I had memorized for the occasion. Telling His Holiness how much the Catholic Church has contributed to Taiwan and mentioning my own experience. His Holiness smiled real big as I struggled with his mother tongue. At the end, I said, "Es todo el español que se habla usted inglés?" That means I have used all my Spanish. Do you speak English? His Holiness smiled again and said, "Yes, I do." I was done, and almost I want to ask, how come nobody knows you speak English? I guess His Holiness would have said, nobody ever asked me that question. Well, American aid to Taiwan back in my youth was distributed to the local people through the church in the neighborhood. And Taiwan was eventually weaned off American aid in 1965. We were able to stand on our own feet by designing an ambitious economic development strategy, import substitution plus export expansion. Since then, Taiwan has become a well-known success story. Let me give you a little background on Taiwan. Taiwan, officially known as the Republic of China, is an island of 36,000 square kilometers, excuse me, or 14,000 square miles, slightly larger than 1/3 of the state of Indiana. It has a population of 23.5 million, more than 3 times that of Indiana. In terms of land area, Taiwan ranks 143rd in the world, and for population, it ranks 53rd. Taiwan has world's 22nd largest GDP and 22nd highest per capita GDP of 47,790 on PPP, the purchasing power parity basis. Taiwan is also the 19th largest trading nation of the world and the 9th largest trading partner of the United States, ahead of countries such as India and Saudi Arabia. Taiwan also has the world's 9th largest trade surplus of $48 billion in 2015. Having witnessed Taiwan's growth into a vibrant economy and a robust democracy, I want to share with you what we have accomplished recently and my thoughts on how we may redefine Taiwan's role in Asia and the world, given the challenges and opportunities we now face. First of all, I will mention our unique geographical location. Taiwan is situated amid the world's largest economy, the United States, the second largest economy, mainland China, and the third largest economy, Japan. The upside of this situation is that The Taiwanese speak better Chinese than Americans and Japanese. Better English than mainland Chinese and Japanese. And better Japanese than mainland Chinese and Americans. My English teacher used to say in class 40 years ago, if a person speaks 3 languages, he is trilingual. If a person he speaks 2 languages, he's bilingual. If he speaks only 1 language, he's an American. Well, things have changed a lot since then. Today, no monolingual person most likely is an American. The downside is that we were caught in the crosshair of great power competition between the world's most powerful state, the United States, and an emerging power, mainland China. This great power competition makes Taiwan strategically important. No wonder some say Taiwan is an unthinkable aircraft carrier, while others describe it as an immobile aircraft carrier. In the realm of international political economy, Taiwan, like its neighbors in the vicinity of mainland China, relies heavily on the mainland Chinese market for trade and investment opportunities. Since 2003, mainland China has become Taiwan's largest trading partner and the largest destination of Taiwan's own outward investment. As a consequence, in 2015, mainland China and Hong Kong combined took about 39% of Taiwan's merchandise exports. Taiwan enjoys a large trade surplus with mainland China, averaging around $70 billion US. But this is larger than Taiwan's global trade surplus, which averages about 30 billion a year. This means that the trade with mainland China is absolutely important to Taiwan. If we don't have it, Taiwan will have a very large trade deficit. So when the mainland Chinese market enriches Taiwan, Taiwan has greatly diversified its export destinations to avoid concentrating on a single market. Secondly, historical indignities still live on in memory. Let me start by outlining mainland China's collective memory. Mainland China remembers a period between the 19th century to the People's Republic's establishment in 1949 as a century of humiliation. Events like the Opium War, 1840, the British-French invasion of Beijing, 1860, the Sino-French War, 1884, the violent response of the 8-power international expedition to the Boxer Rebellion, 1900, and the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945, which caused the death of at least 20 million Chinese people. To name just a few, left indelible scars on the Chinese psyche. For mainland China, the need to strengthen the nation is what all of the society, elites and the general public, all agreed upon. For an illuminating contrast, the American dream is about individual freedom, while the mainland Chinese dream is about the nation's glory. Japan is still very much the target of mainland China's intense nationalism, for it seized Taiwan after the First Sino-Japanese War of 1895 and inflicted severe casualties on China during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Taiwan, therefore, in the eyes of the mainland, is the last piece of territory that mainland China needs to recover in its long struggle against imperialism. This is also the reason why the tiny Diaoyutai Islands, or Senkaku Islands in the Japanese eye, East China Sea, with an area of only 6 square kilometers, has stirred up so much national uproar in mainland China and in Taiwan for the last 40 years. Japan's collective mindset has been very different from that of mainland China over the last 60 years. Japan regards its war with China as part of the Pacific War, ultimately lost to the United States, not to China. Japan also believes that the cause of the Pacific War was a natural result of great power interaction, not its military aggressiveness. Therefore, it's only natural for Japan to pay respect at the Yasukuni War Shrine to the war crime perpetrators sentenced as war criminals by the 1946 International Military Tribunal of the Far East, with other military personnel who died in the war. Visits by senior Japanese politicians to the Yasukuni War Shrine are a constant reminder to mainland China and Taiwan that Japan has never been remorseful about its war deeds in China. In a similar vein, the Japanese government has not yet formally apologized to the so-called comfort women, the military sexual slaves as defined by the United Nations Human Rights Commission in January 1996. In Taiwan, only 3 comfort women are still alive. I have personally helped them in a variety of ways over the past 20 years. I invite them to the presidential office for tea or for lunch and visit their homes just to show my strong support. I hope justice won't come too late for them. Taiwan's social psychology, at least for a significant portion of its population, has been impacted by both its Chinese lineage and Japanese colonial experience. Mainland China is by and large regarded as both a national security threat and a rising commercial opportunity. Japan is regarded as a friendly country despite the past atrocities it committed during Taiwan's colonial era. Here, the respective histories of China, Japan, and Taiwan converge to shape Taiwan's identity politics, and in turn, Taiwan stands toward its powerful neighbors. Thirdly, it's important to know yourself, and at the same time, knowing your rivals and friends is also critical. This is the International Relations 101, the very essence of realism. In 2000, when former President Chen Shui-bian came to power, Taiwan's GDP was about 27% of that of mainland China's. By 2008, when I was first elected, the ratio was down to 9%. By 2016, Taiwan's GDP is projected to be only 5% of mainland China's. We know from the past experience that when mainland China grows fast, Taiwan grows as well, but at a lower pace. And when mainland China slows down, Taiwan decelerates at a faster clip. This means that the gap between the two entities' economic size will only widen as time goes by. This possesses a host of challenges to Taiwan in terms of commerce, mainland China's fast-growing market power, and the brand of national capitalism, emphasizing national champion companies over small and medium-sized enterprises, could whittle away at the competitiveness of Taiwan's companies. In terms of security, mainland China's increasing resources have buoyed its military procurement, which is eclipsing Taiwan's military preparedness and tilting the overall military balance in East Asia. Mainland China also has the financial wherewithal to influence other countries' foreign policies in East Asia. The balance of power between the United States and mainland China is frequently assessed, and so is the balance of will between the two great powers when it comes to Taiwan. In broad terms, Taiwan has only two grand strategies to choose from, each with its own risk. Rapprochement and confrontation. I myself adhere to realpolitik thinking and chose rapprochement. And under the rubric of the 1992 consensus, one China respective interpretation, in contrast with those of my predecessors and my successor. Simply put, we seek to maintain a peaceful relationship with mainland China, a friendly relationship with Japan, and a close relationship with the US. I will explain below what I mean by peaceful, friendly, and close. Let me begin with mainland China. In my inaugural address on May 20th, 2008, I announced my new position of maintaining the status quo in the Taiwan Strait with a policy of no unification, no independence, and no use of force under the framework of the Republic of China Constitution. No unification means no unification talks with mainland China during my term of office. No independence means no support for the Taiwan independence movement. No use of force is, of course, self-explanatory. The objective was to facilitate the peaceful development of cross-strait relations on the basis of the 92 consensus, which state that both sides of the Taiwan Strait adhere to the one China policy, but acknowledge that either may express its own interpretation through separate oral statements. This is generally referred to as one China respective interpretations. With this new policy in place, we were able to sign 23 agreements with mainland China in the last 8 years, covering trade, travel, agricultural, health, judicial, educational, financial, scientific, and nuclear matters. Mainland Chinese visitors to Taiwan rose to 4 million last year, up 14 times compared to the year before I took office, while mainland Chinese students rose to 50 times over the same period to 42,000. The number of Taiwan visitors to the Chinese mainland has remained constant at around 5 million. High officials from the two sides met and called each other by their official titles, a move unprecedented in history. Culminating in the meeting of mainland Chinese leader Xi Jinping and myself in Singapore a year ago on November the 7th. Both of us formally reconfirmed the fundamental role of the 1992 consensus, namely one China respective interpretations, agreed to reduce hostilities between us and expand and deepen cross-strait interchange in all aspects. Cross relations are at their best in 66 years, and the Taiwan Strait, which used to be a bloody battlefield, has become a boulevard of peace and prosperity. Secondly, I will talk about the United States. Taiwan's relations with the US were at their lowest point before I took office. So the first thing I did was to restore bilateral high-level trade between the two sides through a policy of low-key and surprise-free actions. The US continued to honor its commitment under the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act by selling Taiwan $20.1 billion worth of defensive military hardware in 8 years, the highest figure in 2 decades, far exceeding sales under previous presidents. In 2012, the US included Taiwan in its visa waiver program. Taiwan is the only one among the 38 members of the program that have formal diplomatic relations with the US. So this decision was enthusiastically welcomed by the people of Taiwan. On the other hand, as you know, Taiwan visitors to the US increased by at least 40% as a result. As you know, Taiwan tourists not only admire the American way of life, they are also very serious shoppers. They definitely would contribute to the reduction of the American trade deficit with Taiwan. The US strongly welcomes rapprochement between Taiwan and mainland China. Susan Thornton, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the US State Department, said in May last year that Taiwan-US relations were at their best ever. She noted that this is largely due to the stable management of cross-strait relations. Obviously, she's not the only one official in the State Department and beyond who said the same thing. Now, let me talk about Japan. In Taiwan-Japan relations as well, important strides were made in the last 8 years. In some cases, we even saw historic progress. I call this relationship a special partnership because Japan is Taiwan's third largest trading partner and an important source of foreign aid and technology. Despite the lack of formal diplomatic relations, Taiwan signed 28 agreements with Japan during my presidency, about 50% of the total agreement since 1972, when the two countries severed diplomatic relations. One of these agreements is the 2013 Taiwan-Japan Fishery Agreement, which allows fishermen from Taiwan and Okinawa to operate in the maritime zone of 70,000 square kilometers near the almost twice the size of Taiwan, near the disputed Diaoyu-tai, or Senkaku in Japanese. The agreement solved a 40-year-old fishery dispute between Taiwan and Japan and allowed the two sides to shelve their territorial dispute. Before the agreement was signed, there were 17 disputes in the year 2012, but the number went down to only 1 in 2013 and 0 thereafter. The agreement was welcomed by the US, by the ASEAN countries, by Australia, New Zealand, and the European Union. The only party that is not happy with the agreement is who? Take a guess. Who is unhappy about the agreement? You know who? The fish. Because the catch of quality species has almost tripled. So the fish has made quite a sacrifice. Another important step forward is the Open Skies Agreement of 2011, which opened all Japanese commercial airports except 2 airports in Tokyo to Taiwan Airlines, which with beyond rights, the fifth freedom to other cities, except 2 airports in Tokyo. Moreover, the agreement places no restrictions on the number of flights and the type of airplane. This move has led to a dramatic increase in two-way tourist arrivals, from 2.5 million when I took office to more than 5 million, double. After the 2010 earthquake, tsunami, and Fukushima nuclear incident, Taiwanese people donated more than $200 million for the relief efforts, which was larger than the total of the other 93 donor countries combined. My wife and I joined many others in a telephone in March 2011 to solicit donations, and the event was televised live. Japanese people were very touched and grateful, and in the following 2 years, hundreds of groups visit Taiwan to show their gratitude. It's very common to see Japanese groups coming out of the airport with a banner that says in Chinese, "Thank you, Taiwan." In 2014, Taiwan's National Palace Museum held an unprecedented exhibition of its top art collections for 3 months. each in Tokyo and Kyushu. What did they exhibit? It's a meat-like stone, 肉形石, and 翡翠白菜. So these two exhibitions create a big crowd almost every day. Many feel that Taiwan-Japan relations are at its best. They have been since 1972. So in the last 8 years, the Republic of China has tried to play 5 roles in Asia and the world. First, we have been a peacemaker. Taiwan has largely achieved peace in the Taiwan Strait with mainland China, and in the East China Sea with Japan, and in part of the South China Sea with the Philippines. Second, we have been a provider of international humanitarian aid. Taiwan has provided humanitarian aid, including both cash and relief materials, to places from mainland China to West Africa, from Caribbean Sea to Syria, from Nepal to Central America, and from Japan to the Philippines. Third, we have been a promoter of international cultural exchange. I just mentioned that Taiwan's National Palace Museum held an exhibition of its art treasures in 2 cities of Japan, Tokyo and Fukuoka. The Republic of China government had decided to build Taiwan into an Asia-Pacific higher education center. In fact, foreign and mainland Chinese students studying in Taiwan have grown from around 30,000 in 2008 to over 100,000 in 2015. So the ROC government has also concluded many educational, scientific, and cultural agreements with foreign countries and sent hundreds of artists, scholars, and scientists to visit foreign countries for cooperation. Fourth, we have been a creator of new technologies and business opportunities. In 2015-16, Taiwan's competitiveness in innovation ranked the 11th in the world and 3rd in Asia, according to the World Economic Forum. Fifth, we have been a benchmark of Chinese culture. In Taiwan, we have a 37-part ritual to celebrate the birthday of Confucius. 祭孔一共有37个仪节啊。And people from other countries that have historically been influenced by Confucianism, such as the Japanese, the Korean, and Vietnamese, and even mainland Chinese, are very enthusiastic about this practice. Meanwhile, Taiwan and mainland China scholars jointly compile and publish an unprecedented Chinese dictionary with 5,000 pages, 100,000 entries, and 10 million words in both traditional and simplified Chinese characters. This is an inclusive, collaborative way to deal with the long-running contention between mainland China and Taiwan regarding the format of Chinese characters. So this is the first time for such a tremendous effort. Ladies and gentlemen, I said earlier that our grand strategy is to maintain a peaceful relationship with mainland China, a friendly relationship with Japan, and a close relationship with the United States. To implement the grand strategy, I have tried my best to let Taiwan play well the 5 roles we have just described in the international community. To achieve this is no small feat. It's like playing chess, 3 chess games with 3 different players. That is mainland China, the US, and Taiwan's domestic politics at the same time. And the 3 games can interact with each other. When our former president, Li Denghui, stepped down in the year 2000, 54 countries gave visa-free or landing visa treatment to travelers from Taiwan. When the former president, Chen Shui-bian, stepped down in 2008, the number still stood at 54, no change. By the time I stepped down as president 6 months ago, today, the number was up to 164. This was an increase of 110 countries and territories and a jump of 3 times. So the Republic of China has only 22 diplomatic allies in the world, yet 164 countries and territories are willing to give us, our citizens, that courtesy. So Taiwan must have done something right. I believe this progress is just another indicator of the positive new role of the Republic of China, Taiwan in Asia and the world in the last 8 years. Taiwan has become a more respectable and reliable member of the global village. Ladies and gentlemen, I try my best, and I know history will judge my efforts with its cruel fairness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be here with you today and have an opportunity to begin your dialogue with this wonderful, impressive audience. And the first thing I want to do is just to welcome you back to the US. For the past 8 years, you have not been a free man, not been able to travel as you would like, and so I guess I would just like to ask you, what would you like to do now that you actually have the option of spending your time in the way that you most prefer?
Well, actually, I have, in the last 8 years, every time when I visit,
our diplomatic allies in Central and South America or the Caribbean Sea, I will travel through the United States. So I will stay in normally 24 hours. But most of the time, I will stay in a hotel. Well, I play the role of 宅男. But sometimes I could go out and to visit museums. And well, when I visit Hawaii, I will go to see the USS Missouri in the Pearl Harbor, particularly the deck where the surrender ceremony took place on September the 2nd, 1945. So now I'm much freer than I was before to travel. Certainly I will hope to visit many places in the United States.
Great, thank you.
Are you going to invite me to your school?
I hope so, yeah. North Carolina is beautiful, especially this time of year. I think it's about 40 degrees warmer than it is here, so. One of the things that strikes me thinking about the last 8 years is how quickly the situation in Taiwan and in cross-strait relations has evolved. You know, it's hard for us sometimes to remember how different the world was just a few years ago. And one of the things I think we've all come to take for granted is the ability to fly directly from downtown Taipei, actually, Songshan Airport, to many different cities in the mainland. Actually, when you took office, there were no direct flights. We were still trekking through Hong Kong, and changing planes, very expensive, took a whole day. And so many things have changed in that way so quickly and so completely and comprehensively that it's kind of hard to remember what it used to be like. Given all the things that changed during your administration, what do you see as the most important and consequential developments in cross-strait relations over that time?
Well, more travel, more trade, more students, more visitors. These are all very important changes. I think the most important thing is we are able to gradually build some mutual trust between Taiwan and mainland China. I think this is the most valuable asset. Let me just give you an example. When I met Mr. Xi Jinping in Singapore, November last year, well, our people negotiate with them the basic rules of the meeting. So we propose that forget about the country we represent. Forget about the title we use. And we will sign no agreement. And we will issue no press releases. So we just meet and discuss the most important thing, such as using the 92 consensus as the basis of our relationship. We reduce hostilities and will expand and deepen across relations. These were actually done just in a few hours, particularly when we talk about the things that we think may be too sensitive to do. So this is a very impressive thing. You know, obviously, each side have a lot of things in common in this area. And when we almost ready, when our people were almost ready to leave, well, they all remind the other side, please let the Americans know. So I think the American government got the message on November the 2nd. And they were also very happy. In other words, we try to make things as transparent as possible and let the other side know that out of these three parties, neither one will have to make choices between the two. In other words, they can have good relations with two sides. I think this is probably the key to our success.
On that same point, in your talk, you mentioned that officials began referring to one another by their actual titles a bit. And certainly, one of the things that I noticed was that at the working level, officials of the ROC government and the PRC government began interacting. Was that something that you were able to negotiate with the other side, or did the necessity, you know, the extensiveness of the actual practical relations cause people to begin to work together as a kind of organic development?
I think it comes very naturally, because when we signed 23 agreements, and we have a trade relations of 116 billion US dollars, with that kind of massive exchange, there's no reason to keep the necessary formality. When we are dealing with their minister, so maybe they won't call each other minister in a very open occasion, but if not as a formal occasion, you know, they all call by their official titles. So this is what I have been advocated for 8 years. Taiwan and the mainland are at a very unique situation. Actually, no such case in other countries. If you said, what about Germany? No, the division of Germany is caused by international reasons, not civil war. How about Korea? No, either. It's the same thing. So we have a very strange situation in Taiwan and the mainland. So we develop a different response to this. That's why I advocate mutual non-denial of sovereignty and mutual non-recognition of sovereignty and mutual non-denial of governing authority. 主权互不承认，治权互不否认。I don't know whether you understand what I'm talking about. Well, this is a similar joke. When in the early 90s, the government and people in Taiwan changed our constitution. We no longer call mainland China a rebel group. So we also canceled the emergency decree, 动员戡乱时期的法律, so that the previous situation no longer exists. So the journalists asked me, at the time I was vice chairman of the Mainland Affairs Council, they said, Mr. Vice Chairman, if we no longer call them rebels, so what they are. I said, we know what they are not, but we don't know what they are. And the response from the press is, Mr. Ma, we don't know what you are talking about. So you can see that this is a situation very difficult to describe. never happened in history. So we have to figure out something that both sides agree and other parties don't find it too difficult to understand. It takes a lot of time. So it's been almost 20, 25 years for me when I started to work in this area to trying to figure out a way the two sides could accept. So they won't formally recognize that there is a principle called in regard to sovereignty, no recognition. In regard to governing authority, no denial. They wouldn't formally accept that. But in practice, it has to be done that way. Otherwise, we cannot do business with each other. No, you are right. The necessity of things makes it happen.
Speaking of misunderstanding or not being understood, I think whenever a person has a great deal of authority and importance, people put a lot of hopes and expectations on that person's shoulders, and invariably, things that the leader says or does are misunderstood or misinterpreted. Are there any particular events or moments from your presidency where you felt that you were misunderstood or misinterpreted or misrepresented that you particularly would like to have another chance to explain, or that rankle with you and you'd like to talk about?
I mentioned in my address earlier that the first thing we did when I took office, and in the inaugural address, I said, I want to maintain the status quo of Taiwan Strait under a policy of no unification, no independence, and no use of force under the ROC Constitution. Some people question that you support one China, but why do you oppose unification? I said, listen, what I'm saying is I don't believe time is ripe for the two sides to talk about unification. If conditions are not there, there's no way we can do it. So I don't want to have unification talk with the mainland during my term of office. I can work as long as 8 years, but I don't believe that we can create all the conditions for unification in 8 years. Well, I think I'm right, because if you look at the history of cross-strait relations, even at a time when President Li Denghui promulgated the National Unification Guidelines and set up a National Unification Council, there's not much progress in cross-strait relations. So I don't care about all these formalities, but I try to press the right button to make sure that they could get a message and we can get the job done.
I think understanding the trends in Taiwan is very hard. Those of us who pay attention to Taiwan, we read the results of public opinion polls and we track things over years and years and years, and there's all kinds of polling information from Taiwan, to the point where some of my friends in Taiwan who do polls for a living, professors and their graduate students who actually make the phone calls, they say that sometimes they call a household and the person will say, oh, not you again. So many polls, so many trends, and some of them are very complicated. And one of the things that we've seen in recent decades, and especially in the last 12 years or so, is a very rapid increase in the percentage of Taiwanese who identify as Taiwanese only, as opposed to in the past, the sort of mainstream response to the question was, I'm both Taiwanese and Chinese. So on the one hand, a lot of people are paying attention to this rising identification as Taiwanese only, really, or that's their primary identification. On the other hand, something that I've observed in the last few years, it seems to me that the Republic of China is making a bit of a comeback in Taiwan, that the symbols of the ROC, which used to be heavily criticized, especially by green side, so DPP-leaning activists and politicians, those symbols seem to be more mainstream. Early on in your presidency, people criticized you for not showing the ROC flag enough. During the Sunflower Movement, when they were occupying, the young people were occupying the legislative chamber, they used the ROC flag, which I thought was something new, because so in the past, activists on the other side of Taiwan politics tried to stay away from those symbols. Do you think, is there anything to that? Is the ROC becoming mainstream or becoming mainstream again? And if so, do you think there's any chance that the ROC could provide a platform for cross-strait relations in the future?
I think you're right. The ROC, the concept is coming back, particularly our national flag. If you go to see a baseball game, Taiwan or elsewhere, you will see the flag flying. But when you were asked whether you see yourself as a Chinese or Taiwanese, most people in Taiwan will say Taiwanese, because when you say Chinese, they thought they were citizens of the PRC. So that question never get any real answer. Now, some pollers changed the question by asking that, do you consider yourself a member of Zhonghua Minzu? Actually, the support rate goes up sometime to 80%. You see? And after the Ma Xi meeting, my meeting with Xi Jinping, the Ministry Affairs Council conducted an opinion poll on 92 consensus. The question is, if 92 consensus, one China respective interpretation, and that one China is Republic of China, do you approve it? 61%. So I think Republic of China now gradually, as you said, getting more support. But on the other hand, as I said, the question is the choice between Taiwanese and the Chinese, most likely the Taiwanese will get 70 or at least 60%. So I think some people probably find themselves not able to distinguish the status quo and the status of independence. So sometimes they find it very difficult to make a choice. So I think the design of the questions matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. But do you think the PRC or the Beijing government will ever rethink its determination to reject the ROC as a kind of partner for communication?
Well, it has always been their position that the ROC no longer exists after 1949. That is why when they said one China, that's a very exclusive word. No ROC exists. And this is a principle they won't change. But gradually, people find that this is not the case. Particularly, in many cases, we are very active in the international arena. So recently, during my research, I found there is a Japanese judge of Osaka High Court. When he had a chance to decide on a case of Guanghua Liao. Guanghua Liao is a student dorm purchased by ROC government in 1952 and used it for students from Taiwan. But in 1972, when Japan recognized the PRC and established formal diplomatic relations, the students in the dorm, who are normally leftists, decided to claim that they want Japan return the student dorm to the PRC. So our ambassador, former ambassador, filed suit in the Japanese court, claiming that this is the property of the Republic of China. In the Kyoto District Court, the judge says Taiwan has the capability to sue, even it is not recognized by Japanese. But on the second question, which side should own the dormitory? They said the PRC should own dormitory. But on appeal, in the Osaka High Court, the judge, Asada, is a very interesting judge. He said, I agree with the lower court that Taiwan has a right to sue. But on the issue of the ownership of the property, he said it should belong to the Republic of China to Taiwan. Why? Because Taiwan government continue to rule Taiwan and its surrounding island. So this is a objective existence, objective facts. And he also made an interesting contribution. He said the relationship between mainland China and Taiwan is not a full succession. It is an incomplete succession.
Wow.
I think this is a marvelous, ingenious creation, because in normal cases of revolution, the existing government was overthrown by the revolutionary forces. So other countries eventually recognize the revolutionary forces. So the original government does not exist. But in this case, the original government is still there. It's growing very well. So it's not appropriate to use the traditional theory of international law to say mainland China, PRC, completely succeed the Republic of China. It is not like the Russian Revolution, where the Bolshevik government actually replaced the Tsar government. It's different. I think that could explain a lot of things and provide the peaceful existence between the two sides an important rationale to do that.
If I can turn to an economic question that is raised for me by something you said in your talk. You said that the PRC's economic strategy of setting up national champions could whittle away at the competitiveness of Taiwanese companies, which are mainly, or have been historically, mainly small and medium-sized enterprises, although some of them have been extremely successful in the mainland and have grown very, very large globally as well. I think a lot of Americans, certainly a lot of US economists might say, oh, you don't have to worry because this strategy of state management of the economy, a kind of developmentalism, top-down, and the whole idea of creating national champions can't work because it's not consistent with what we know about how economies work. Do you think that Taiwanese are more able to appreciate the potential of the PRC economy using these developmental policies because of your own experience with developmentalism? And do you think that the PRC can continue to grow in this way, or do they need to transition to a more private market-driven economy in order to continue to see the kind of growth that they've had in the past?
I think that the strategy of the PRC I mentioned may work in some cases, but not all the cases, because the small and medium-sized business in Taiwan is very agile, very flexible, and they have survived many international tsunamis, whatever. So I'm quite confident that they could survive. But in some cases, it's very hard for them to compete with the national, state-owned companies from mainland China.
Well, there's one question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind, which is the recent US election. And I would love to know your thoughts on a couple of things related to that really monumental event. First of all, what do you think might be the effects on US policy toward Taiwan and toward the region more broadly? The president-elect has left me, at least, and perhaps others, pretty confused about how he views the region. On economic issues, he seems like a pretty strong critic of China, but his attitude toward alliances and toward US-Japan relations and US relations with South Korea are much more congenial to Beijing's positions. But then on the other hand, right, letting Japan acquire nuclear weapons would certainly be the sort of thing that would be absolutely anathema to Japan. And just in general, the US has followed a very consistent approach to Northeast Asia since the end of World War II. And the possibility that there might be significant changes in that is, I think, raises a lot of alarms for Americans and probably for people in the region. Do you have any sense of where the region is heading and what U.S. policy might be, and ultimately how much difference what the next U.S. president does will actually make, given that the region is also growing under its own momentum now?
Well, from the very beginning, when Mr. Trump joined the presidential race, a lot of people raised that question. If he is elected president, what impact it would have on U.S.-Taiwan relations? Well, if you look at the history, ever since the enactment of the Taiwan Relations Act, around 6 American presidents maintain almost the identical policy. This is probably the only way they could really sort of stimulate the peaceful settlement. So I wouldn't believe that President Trump will change that policy to a great extent. But one thing that could have a great impact on Taiwan is he doesn't like the TPP. Then so if TPP, and it is very important to Taiwan because roughly more than 35% of our trade are with the TPP countries. And we are relatively behind many of our trading partners in terms of free trade agreements. We only have 3. But our competitors like South Korea, Japan, or even mainland China have more than that. So we are actually competing with them at a disadvantage. So if we are able to join TPP, which will help us a lot, but even President Obama found it very difficult to get it passed through Congress. So the other day in Malaysia, when I participated in the World Chinese Economic Summit, I proposed that maybe the countries that have already signed the PP agreement should continue to finish the last mile and reserve a place for the United States. There's nothing we can force the United States to join, but maybe after the TPP worked for a while, the president saw that it's not a bad idea to join. So maybe somebody else could play the leadership role to make the TPP work. And I don't understand why the American general public would thought that the TPP will steal jobs from the United States. Well, but in all the economic theory, a free trade agreement could create trade and actually benefit all the members. And if that becomes a reality, it is not unlikely that it will move to the free trade agreement of APEC. So in other words, it will actually expand. Everyone knows that the World Trade Organization is not really playing the right role because of the Doha round. It's not a very successful experience. So everybody else go back to the traditional bilateral free trade agreement. But if we can use that to expand, well, I think we still have a chance to have something which could be a substitute of World Trade Agreement in this part of the world.
Well, thank you very much. I think now it's time to take some questions from the rest of the audience.
Good to see you again. You probably don't remember, but I was in Taipei in 1998 at the beginning of your term as mayor of Taipei, and it's great to see you again and welcome you to Notre Dame and South Bend, Indiana. This third phase of the event is question and answer. Now, you know a little bit about Roman Catholicism. I don't want you to think that this is an inquisition. The Holy Father's attitude is, who am I to judge? And we'll take the same attitude here tonight. I got up because Professor Rigger had actually asked the first question that a majority of people who submitted questions wanted to hear about. And that was your view about the impact of the election of President-elect Donald Trump on Northeast Asian relations and especially U.S.-Taiwan relations. Since she's already asked this question that's on everybody's mind, I thought I would just add a codicil to it and ask you about how you interpret the significance of the fact that the first foreign leader that President-elect Trump met with was Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And how do you interpret, or how do you read the tea leaves, if you'll pardon the pun, of their first meeting?
I think the meeting primarily concerns the security issues about the U.S.-Japan security arrangements, and also about economic issues. And a lot of people in Asia are talking about maybe Japan could play the leadership role as far as the TPP goes. And we in Taiwan, as I said, certainly hope there will be some changes in the policy of Mr. Trump after he becomes president. According to our experience, the campaign slogans, campaign promises are not necessarily the policy which they will really implement. I remember in 1980 when Mr. Reagan was the Republican candidate, and he said if he becomes president of the United States, he would restore recognition and diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Of course, we knew that that would not happen. You know? So we didn't have any expectation of that.
Okay, a second question comes from a researcher in electrical engineering. So if you don't like this question, please blame Dean Peter Kilpatrick for it. A fellow by the name of UNG An Wang. But actually, a number of other questioners had asked versions of it as well. And you talked a little bit with Professor Rigger about it, but the question is, do you believe that someday in the future, Taiwan and the mainland of China will ultimately reunite? And if so, exactly what date, please?
First of all, I must say I'm not a prophet. 我不是半仙啊。Well, I'm sure most of you must have read the story of three nations, 三国演义. In the beginning, it says that countries divide and unite, but it is just a natural rule. But if you look at the history of China in the last 3,000 years, 70% of the time China was united and 30% divided. From division to unification, or from unification to division, the most common thing is it took a war. It took a war. So what I'm trying to do in the last 8 years as president of the Republic of China, we have to really do something better than our ancestors. We have to solve the problem without resorting to war. That is why seeking rapprochement with mainland China is my top priority. What I'm trying to do is not to fortify our military, our defense to the country. I try to institutionalize rapprochement with mainland China. We try to make a situation to a point where neither side will want to unilaterally change the status quo because the cost could be prohibitively high. For instance, last year, there were 4.18 million mainland Chinese in Taiwan. So every day, there are thousands, and to students, and trade, and everything. So I'm sure nobody really wants to change that. And if we have a problem, if we have a dispute, we could find other ways to solve it. I think as far as unification is concerned, our Constitution, Republic of China Constitution, does not exclude that possibility. Actually, in the preface of the amendment, it says very clearly that this amendment is intended for the period before unification. But unification requires a lot of conditions. At the moment, obviously, the conditions are not ripe. So we have to try to make more interchange, more agreements on a variety of issues to make sure that we understand each other. Well, looking at the last 8 years, when I was president, I do see this growing. I do see people understand each other more. And this is a very, in my view, if we continue the process, we can see people getting consensus gradually. And people are getting to know each other much, much better. So I think, I do believe that we shouldn't be hurried. Well, there's a Chinese proverb that says, 欲速则不达. If we want to get faster, well, most likely you won't get to. Okay. 我们闽南话有句叫做假劲弄破碗，吃得太快了，把碗给吃破了。So I think it's very important that we should move, but we shouldn't move too fast. And I understand some people, some men and leaders believe that we can't stop here. We should move ahead. But I think in the last 8 years, we have already moved ahead. As Professor Rick says, the change is tremendous. But it happened in 8 years. So I think we can afford to really wait a little while to get the conditions ready, and then maybe we had a chance to talk about unification.
So during that visit, I had the opportunity to go to a series of meetings with the Kuomintang's Cross-Strait Relations Bureau. And we met in the offices of this organization. And I was sort of struck because I'd expected big pictures of Chiang Kai-shek. And there were a few pictures of Chiang Kai-shek, but the biggest pictures were Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the KMT. And I asked, and a number of the people I was with asked, does the KMT see a place for the sort of nationalist position that Sun Yat-sen had established the party for within the political space in the mainland? And like you, the response was, well, this is a long-term process. But I detected a real optimism that position would become a viable political position eventually. Do you see a time in which the KMT could also be a political force on the mainland?
Well, I don't believe at the moment mainland China will allow the KMT to set up office over there. Well, actually, in mainland China, there is an organization called Revolutionary Committee of the KMT. They seem to believe that could replace KMT. Now, 叫做国民党革命委员会，简称民革啊。But I can assure you, I was the chairman of KMT for many years. That organization does not represent us.
Okay, another question comes from a student, a sophomore, Chong Jiang. And the question is, what were the biggest achievements and challenges during your presidency? This is the torment of the ex-president. You have to get in legacy mode right away. I'm sure President Obama feels your pain at this point. Please. Please.
Yeah. Challenges to my presidency?
Yeah.
Well, there are many, many. Well, I think...
and the biggest achievements, so it's...
Before I took office, particularly when I was campaigning, I hope I could build a free, a just, and prosperous Taiwan domestically. And I hope I could build a peaceful relations with mainland China, and I could build a friendly international environment. So far, I think, well, we have actually concluded peace with mainland China. Although we have not signed any peace treaty, peace pact, but looking at these 23 agreements, each one is a peace agreement, because without peace, it's just impossible. On the other hand, in the international community, well, I mentioned in my address that when I took office, there were only 58 countries and territories that gave us visa-free or landing visa treatment. But now it's 164. That's what I said. We must have done something right. But I think the most important thing, I tried to change the image of Taiwan. That is why I think we should, first of all, be a peacemaker. So we make peace in Taiwan Strait, in East China Sea, and in South China Sea. And then we try to be a provider of international humanitarian aid. We have really done a lot of these activities, and that certainly help us to polish our image abroad. So I think these things could let the whole world know Taiwan is an asset of international community. It's not a burden. It's not a liability. So I think that also works. So gradually people will understand Taiwan matters. Well, actually, Professor Rick wrote a book called Why Taiwan Matters. So I think we still have our own way to make the situation better. But first of all, we have to deal with mainland China very carefully. You have to press the right button.
Okay. A number of questioners had asked about specific territorial disputes in the region, both in the South China Sea and in the Senkaku Dayaku Islands. What position does Taiwan take on those historic claims? And I guess we could add Tibet to the list of those tricky territorial issues.
Well, usually we do not consider Tibet part of the territorial issues. But on the issues on East China Sea and South China Sea, our position is the same. First of all, 主权在我, the sovereignty of those disputed territories, we have sovereignty. Secondly, 搁置争议, shelve the dispute. And number 3, 和平互惠, peaceful and reciprocal. And number 4, 共同开发, joint development. That is why I propose a East China Sea peace initiative on the August the 5th, 2012, and regarding East China Sea. And so in less than a year, we were able to conclude the fishery agreement with Japan. Right, I didn't touch the territorial issue because I know it is almost intractable to do it in a short period of time. That's why I started with the fishery agreement, and we're very successful. So at least for people who are concerned about East China Sea issues, primarily fishermen in Taiwan, they're very happy. They are very happy. But on the territorial issue, we could wait for a certain period of time to see whether there is a good condition to do that. Same thing is true with South China Sea. I didn't mention what we did with the Filipinos. I'm sure most of you probably noticed that in 2013, the Filipinos Coast Guard shot dead one Taiwan fisherman and seriously damaged his ship. So as president, I asked the Filipinos, first of all, to apologize. Second, to pay damages. And number 3, to prosecute the wrongdoers. And number 4 is to negotiate the fishery agreement with us. At least they are not that willing to do that. So I said, okay, we will enforce a economic sanction. 3 months later, they agreed to apologize. They agreed to pay compensation to the family of the victim, and they also agreed to prosecute the 8 members of the Filipino Coast Guard under the charge of homicide. And number four, fishery agreement, they do have difficulties. So we decided to conclude another agreement. It is in regard of enforcement actions. There are basically 3 points. First of all, no use of force. Secondly, in case of wrongdoings, and law enforcement, each side should notify the other side within 1 hour. So there is a 1 hour notice for enforcement action. And number 3, in case of detention or arrest of people or ship, they should be released in 3 days. So once this is in place, actually disputes almost disappear. So I think we know how to deal with the issues, and we take effective measures to do it. Well, I feel especially happy because the format of the agreement or the content was actually proposed by myself almost 35 years ago when I was a student at Harvard Law School. So this is quite something, and we hope we could expand that further and make peace. So once that is done, I think most of the issues could be gradually resolved. But South China Sea is much more complicated because there are more than 200 islands, rocks, low tide elevations, and submerged banks, a variety of things. And there are many claimants. For instance, the Vietnamese occupy at least 23 islands or rocks, and the Filipinos maybe around 10, and mainland China around 13, and Malaysia 5, Taiwan 2. So it's very complicated. That is why I propose the South China Sea Peace Initiative. I think bilateral or multilateral negotiations should have precedence over third-party adjudication. Look at what happened to the arbitration. It doesn't really solve the problem. Actually, in some cases, it creates problem. For instance, the island we occupy, the Taiping Island, they said this is not an island, it's a rock. I was shocked. Why? Because Taiping Island is the only island in South China Sea that has fresh water, and a lot of fresh water. There are 4 wells in Taiping Island. Well number 5 produce the best quality water. We have already asked experts to test the water. The water quality is as good, almost as good as Evian. So if you don't believe, come to Taiwan, I will let you taste. And it could produce about 3 tons of pure water every day, which can serve at least 1,500 people. So if we call that a rock, it's not an island, then no land features in South China Sea could be called island. This is very unfair. But in any case, I think third-party adjudication, either arbitration or litigation, may not be the best solution. I prefer to see negotiations. And then, as I said, we should first of all shelve the dispute and then proceed to see whether we can jointly develop the resources. So I always believe that while sovereignty cannot be divided, but resources can be shared.
Great. So we're going to shift gear a little bit. Sinwei Hong, who is a freshman, asks, what do you think is the purpose of receiving an education overseas? Do you have any advice for Chinese students studying in the U.S. with regard to their education, life, and future service to their country? It's sort of a narrow question, I know, but...
Well, I was a student here 35 years ago, so my information may be a little bit old. But for someone coming from Asia to the United States, well, if you have financial problem, you probably have to make sure that you have enough funds to support your stay. But the most important thing is to understand your environment and work hard. And I think students from East Asia usually work very hard in American universities. And so I think, well, if you have further questions, you should really ask your foreign student advisor.
Okay, fair enough. Last question. The status of Hong Kong vis-a-vis the mainland has to be an issue of great interest to the people of Taiwan. How would you assess, and we can turn off the microphones here and close the door, the status of Hong Kong's agreement with the mainland, and how do, if you don't want to answer this yourself, maybe talk about public opinion on Taiwan, about how they see Hong Kong mainland relations developing and what that sort of says to them about the future evolution of Taiwan mainland relations.
Well, actually, in 1984, when mainland China and Hong Kong reached an agreement on the return of Hong Kong to mainland China, they want to use the one country, two systems. And that one country, two system formula was originally intended for Taiwan, but Taiwan rejects that. Taiwan believes that one country should have only one system, a good system. So that was used in Hong Kong. And what happened in the last 10 more years, you see whether that system actually fits Hong Kong. But in the views of many people in Taiwan, we certainly hope Hong Kong could have democracy, not only in the election of their leaders of the special administrative zone, but also in other members of the legislative council. But of course, they have their laws, they have their regulations, it has to be followed. For the student movement over there, I actually said 2 years ago in the National Day address that I support the democracy movement, but I also believe it has to be done according to the law and to be done in a peaceful way. Now, I was a student activist on campus when I was in Taiwan, in National Taiwan University, particularly in the movement to safeguard the rights of Diaoyu Tai. But still, I think this is very important to know the rules of a democratic society. And on the other hand, I also called upon mainland China to honor its own commitment regarding Hong Kong. This is also very important. If that can be done, I think the possibility of talks between mainland China and Hong Kong on this issue could be done.
Great. I'm going to take the liberty of being the moderator of this session to ask one question, and they have the teleprompters up here. I feel like Donald Trump, being told stay on message, but they haven't taken the teleprompters down yet. But President Ma, I'd like you to comment from your perspective, what has been the most optimistic development on the mainland over the past 20 years, and what is the most worrisome development from your perspective?
Well, I think, I've been dealing with the mainland for the last 20, 30 years. I think the advent of internet has changed a lot of things, and that also holds some hope for the future in terms of democratic movement. I remember 4 years ago when I was running for re-election, I was very much surprised that mainland China allowed the citizens to use the internet to see the campaign promise in Taiwan. Never happened before. And some business people in mainland China flew to Taiwan to watch the electoral process. I was greatly surprised, and particularly some of the things they cover. For instance, I went to a market to asking people to vote for me, but I actually run into the wrong guy. The guy doesn't want to vote for me. So that was quite interesting. And so this shows they also have some confidence to do that, letting their people understand the democratic process in Taiwan. And even more interesting is that on the day of the election, that is January the 14th, we got a result in the evening about 8 o'clock. I think one of the foreign press, it seems to be the French agency or Reuters, interviewed 2 students on the scene. One is from Taiwan, one is from the mainland. The Taiwan student says, look, our election system is very efficient. We cast the vote in the morning, and we get the result in the evening. Very efficient. And the many students said, oh, that's nothing. We also cast the vote in the morning, but we know the result the day before. I was very much surprised,
Yeah.
But it's very interesting, the sense of humor. And they have the courage to say out. So I think gradually people will get together and understanding the goodies, the baddies of the system, and that is the best way to make each other understand.
Okay, well, that's a terrific note to end on, so I'll just ask Professor Hawks to come back and close our proceedings.
Thank you, Professor Desch. I think we can all agree that we've been privy to a most remarkable and unique event. The Asia Leadership Forum once again has provided us with a presentation and a discussion with a genuine leader from Asia, former President Ma Ying-jeou. And I suggest that before we allow him to leave the room while we remain seated, we thank him and Professor Rigger with a very, very warm applause. Thank you.
谢谢大家，希望大家有空来台湾玩，来找我好不好？